fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
I never believed in magic. Not until the ink on my manuscript began to weep. It happened on a Tuesday in the third week of autumn when the air smelled like burnt cinnamon and wet stone. My apartment, a rented attic above a used bookstore in Portland, was quiet except for the rhythmic asterisk tick-tick-tick of the radiator and the occasional groan of the floorboards beneath my bare feet. I had spent 3 months writing this novel, The Raven's Oath asterisk, my first real attempt at something that felt less like a diary and more like a soul laid bare. I didn't think anyone would ever read it. But the ink knew. It had started as a smudge, a single drop of indigo bleeding down the page like a tear. I thought it was a leaky pen. I changed it, wiped the page. I even held it under the light, squinting, convinced it was just shadow. But then it happened again and again. Each time the ink didn't just bleed, it moved. It curled upward like smoke, tracing letters that weren't mine, words I hadn't written. She is here, the bridge has opened. I didn't understand, not then. But I knew with a quiet, terrifying certainty that something had answered my words. I didn't write romance because I believed in it. I wrote it because I was lonely. Not the kind of lonely that comes from being single. The kind that comes from feeling like you're the last person alive who still remembers how to feel deeply. My grandmother used to say, "Love doesn't find you, Lira, it calls. And if you're brave enough to answer, it comes in threes." I thought she was just being poetic. Old women say things like that. But now, standing in my dimly lit room, watching the ink writhe into 3 distinct names. Howl alias Dane. I finally understood. They came 3 nights later. I'd left my manuscript open on the desk, the page glowing faintly under the glow of my desk lamp, as if lit from within. The room was colder than it should have been. My breath curled white in the air. I pulled my cardigan tighter and turned to fetch a blanket. And I screamed. 3 men stood in my living room. Not intruders, not ghosts. Faded. Tall, tense, all wrapped in the raw, lingering scent of storm and salt and something primal, like pine resin and old blood. One leaned against the bookshelf, arms crossed, eyes the color of burnt copper, asterisk, Howl asterisk. His dark hair hung to his shoulders, unkempt, wild, as if he'd been running through forests for days. The second, Elias, sat cross-legged on my rug, long fingers tracing the spine of my manuscript like he'd known it his whole life. His eyes were green, deep forest green, and when they met mine, the air in the room thickened. The third, Dane, stood by the window, silent, watching me like he was waiting for me to break. "I didn't invite you," I whispered. Howl stepped forward. His boots didn't make a sound on the wooden floor. He stopped just beyond arm's reach. His voice was low, gravel dragged over silk. "You didn't have to, you wrote us." Elias didn't look up. "You called us with every tear you shed over your characters. Every time you wondered if love could be real. Every time you feared it couldn't." I swallowed, my throat was dry. I'm a writer, not a witch. Dane finally turned. His face was carved from marble, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, lips a pale, dangerous pink. He had the look of a man who'd never smiled and never needed to. "You didn't write magic, little scribe," he murmured. "You woke it." The air between them hummed. "Not with electricity. With asterisk hunger asterisk." I felt it like a pulse against my skin, 3 different rhythms, each one resonating with something buried inside me. A thrumming beneath my ribs, a warmth curling up my spine, a memory I didn't know I'd lost. I took a step back. They didn't move. "You're not real," I said. Howl reached into his coat, pulled out a dagger, black steel, etched with silver runes that shifted like living veins. He held it toward me. "Touch it," he said. I hesitated. Then I reached out. The moment my fingertip brushed the hilt, a vision ripped through me. Ashore at midnight, waves crashing against jagged rocks. 3 men standing knee-deep in the surf, their skin gleaming with salt, their eyes glowing, each a different hue of fire. And me, barefoot, naked, my arms wrapped around them all, not in fear, in belonging. My breath hitched. I dropped the dagger. It clattered to the floor. "You're," my voice cracked, "your werewolves asterisk." Elias smiled, slow, sad, beautiful. not wolves, guardians of the veil. You're the bridge maker, Lira, the last one. The one who can open the way between the mortal world and the hidden realms. Your words, they're the key. I stumbled into a chair, my hands trembled. Why me? Dane stepped closer, closer than the others, close enough that I could see the fine dust of ash clinging to his lashes. Because your pen doesn't just tell stories, he said, voice so quiet it felt like a confession. It remembers them, and the world forgets too easily. We are the ones who remembered you long before you knew what love was. I stared at them. 3 men, 3 souls, 3 heartbeats echoing mine. And I realized somewhere in my childhood, in my grandmother's stories, in the bruises of my past, in the silence between breaths, I'd always known they'd come. Things changed after that. They didn't stay, not all the time. But they came. Kale returned every night, bringing me books from forgotten libraries, tomes bound in dragonhide, pages filled with languages that made my eyes ache to read. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it was because he wanted me to hear him. Elias brought me tea, chamomile mixed with something herbal, bitter, alive. He'd sit beside me while I wrote, his fingers brushing mine as he turned the page. His touch was warm, steady, like an anchor. He told me stories of the veil, the realms beyond our world where time bent like paper and emotions became landscapes. There's a place, he once whispered as I fell asleep against his shoulder, where all the love that was never spoken still burns. Dane was the most dangerous. He didn't touch me, not physically, not at first. But he watched, with eyes that saw inside me, past my fear, past my doubt, past the shell I'd built to survive the world. One night, after a week of silence, he appeared in my doorway, soaked to the skin from the rain. I didn't come to speak, he murmured. I looked up from my manuscript. The words had stopped flowing. My pen hung limp in my fingers. I came to tell you, he said, stepping slowly inside, that I've loved you since you wrote your first sentence, even before you knew what love was. I didn't move. He knelt before me, rainwater pooling at his feet. I know what you think, that we're not real, that you're mad, that this is some fever dream you wrote into existence. He reached up, hesitated, then gently brushed a tear from my cheek. But Lira, you're not dreaming. His gaze held mine. And in that moment I saw it. The truth. They weren't just fated to me. They were fated to each other. 3 men, 1 soul. And me. A bridge. I reached for him. And he kissed me. Not gently. Not softly. Like he'd been waiting 1,000 years. His lips were cold, his tongue tasted of storm and iron, and when his arms wrapped around me, pulling me into his chest, his heartbeat thundered against mine. Then Kale was behind me, his hands on my waist, his breath warm against my neck. And Elias, kneeling before me, kissed my ankle like it was sacred. I gasped. They didn't stop. Not when my shirt fell open. Not when my breath turned ragged. Not when I arched into them, trembling. They were careful, so careful, like I might shatter, like I was the most precious thing they'd ever touched. And I, weak, trembling 28-year-old writer with no structure, no agent, no future, felt more whole than I ever had. I didn't know how to love 3 men. But my body remembered. My bones remembered. My soul screamed. Yes, asterisk. The next morning I woke alone. The sheets were cold. My manuscript lay open on the desk. The ink on the page had dried. But it was no longer black. It was gold. And there was a new line, shaky, as if written by a hand too full of emotion to hold steady. The veil weakens, the hunters come for the bridge maker. They will take you before you learn what you are. You must choose, not just them, but yourself. I sat up. A knock at the door. 3 knocks. 3 different rhythms. I stood. My heart pounded, not with fear. With asterisk hope. I opened the door. Kale stood there holding a cloak lined with starlight. Elia's with a silver locket that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Dane with a single rose, the petals black as midnight, still dripping with dew. They didn't speak. They just looked at me, waiting. I took the cloak. I took the locket. I took the rose. Then I stepped forward, and I kissed them, all three, at once. And the world asterisk our world asterisk shattered asterisk. Not in destruction. In asterisk rebirth asterisk. A wind howled through the halls of my apartment. The walls trembled. The books on my shelves rose into the air, pages fluttering like wings. The ink on my manuscript blazed golden, rising into the air, forming words that spiraled like a pact. I choose them. I choose magic. I choose love unbroken, unbound, unlimited. The room dissolved. We stood on a cliff. Above us the sky split open, a rift of violet flame. Below us the ocean roared, black as tar, lit by the glow of 100,000 lanterns floating on the waves. And between us asterisk them asterisk, three men, their skin now shimmering with silver veins, their eyes blazing with primal fire. One stepped forward, whispered, "Welcome home, bridge maker." Behind us a voice cold, ancient, made of bone and rust, called out, "You dare bind the veil to a mortal." I turned. A figure stood in the storm, crowned with thorns, draped in the skins of dead gods. The hunters, and they were coming. Kale's hand found mine. Elia's fingers curled around my other. Dane pressed his forehead to mine. And all three spoke as one. Let them come. I closed my eyes and whispered, I'm not afraid anymore.